order. It's now 9:03. We have here Nancy Olson, Nancy Hall, and Phil Measy. So far, Joe Schofield and Ron DePonte on the phone. I'd entertain a motion from the members here to allow Ron and Joe to vote.
So moved.
Nancy moved.
Second.
Nancy Hall moved. Olson seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So you guys can vote. We do not have a quorum. So, Bob?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Another motion to allow Bob to vote.
Oh, I guess so. So
Okay.
moved.
Nancy Hall.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can we,
Okay, everybody.
can we vote against that? I think you should.
Okay, at least we have we have at least 6 of us here to discuss this. And I think what we will probably need to do with regard to the budget is turn in the numbers, and we can do the official approval at a later meeting, but we can get the sense of the committee at this point. So I don't see that as a huge problem. So we're going to start off just before we go into the budget with the association manager report. Scott, you want to?
Sure.
Sorry, I thought I turned it off when it rang a minute ago.
Scott Charnock, Pelican Preserve. The only item I had was, I sent it to all of the members. It had to do with the FPL maintenance agreement that we currently have in place and which is funded out of the GSCDD portion of the budget. What they want to do is they want to upgrade all the light fixtures in the neighborhoods from the current lighting to LEDs. For us to do that, Chris would have to sign another maintenance agreement, and it would increase our monthly fee for the maintenance on the poles, because we don't own them, by $109 a month. Spoke to Nancy, we reviewed it, and it can be absorbed into our current budget.
Scott, just a curiosity question. If it's LEDs, why is the cost going up?
The cost of the fixtures are greater.
Uh-huh.
It does not mean our usage is gonna go up, our usage will go down. So it will basically be a wash, but the rental and maintenance on LEDs are more expensive.
So we think that they'll offset, that the budget we have for the FPL right now will cover this.
Okay.
Because and the only concern I have is at what point in the year they do it, because the later in the year they do it, the longer we're gonna be paying higher electric fees, so the sooner the better as far as.
And with 306 lights, which is what their maintenance agreement covers, it should be a savings.
Mm-hmm.
But what that's going to be, they can't even
Okay.
give me any idea.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember when we,
What was the,
Go ahead.
what was the cost per pole, per light again, 100 something?
Oh, no, it's not per pole. It's going to increase our fee. Our existing fee is $5,106. It's going to increase it by $109 to $5,216.
and that's per month.
Thank you.
And that's per month. That's part of our monthly utility bill that shows as a street light expense.
And Scott, Bob Gefford, what do we expect our monthly savings to be on energy usage after making the conversion?
They're only estimating 15 to 18%.
Which is how much?
I can't tell you that.
Okay. I hope it's more than the 100 and,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it will be, it will be more than that, but, the owners will get better lighting in the streets.
Yeah. If it's 15 to 18%, it will,
And I
I
think
would think it would be a lot more significant than $100.
oh, yeah, yeah.
when we replaced those other ones with LED a couple of years ago, it seemed like it was about a 15% savings on
Yes.
them.
Okay, thank you.
Cause that year was the year that, FPL had the big 11% increase, and our lighting still went down a little bit despite that increase, so it more than offset the increase.
So this year, this should be 309 poles, should be a rather significant savings in electric usage.
Once they get them installed, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct, okay.
And we don't have that timetable yet, because Chris would have to sign the maintenance agreement. Chris Shoemaker,
Well,
and,
I know we can't do approvals
Yeah.
today, but it's my sense of that I think we ought to go forward and authorize Chris
Yeah.
to
I think so
revise the
too.
maintenance agreement.
Mm-hmm. I think so too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I guess, will we officially have to approve that? I'm not sure.
it's gonna be part of the budget as
Okay.
an increase in cost
Okay,
and the percentages.
yeah.
But are we gonna change anything on the budget of that, or are we assuming that the electric's gonna offset it?
It's gonna offset.
So we're gonna leave the budget numbers where they are?
Correct, and all we're doing is extending the maintenance agreement that's already in place.
Okay,
Okay,
so I won't make any changes to the budget?
No.
yeah.
Okay.
Let's leave it as is. Okay. Any other questions of Scott on that? If not, we will turn to the budget.
Thank you.
Nancy, you,
Okay, I don't know where to start. If you look at the handout we got that they printed out for us on
Yep.
page one, the budget numbers it shows there are the second budget we submitted to Stephen. The first one was a really high budget to give us breathing room, and then this was on the one that we did last month, which brought it down substantially. It does not
Okay,
include,
Nance, for the phone people, kind of walk me where we are. I need to find which of these handouts.
Page one.
okay, page one,
of the budget summary,
it's, Gateway Services Budget Summary.
Okay, is that, okay, budget summary, I'm there. All right.
Okay,
year-over-year comparison, it says.
Yep,
Yep.
okay, everybody got that?
yes.
Okay, so that,
was kind enough to make me 48-page copies.
Wow, okay,
all right, so that number is from the second budget that we submitted to Stephen, so we had reduced a lot of things for that budget. It does not include this 71,000 figure now that, we're proposing we would be responsible for as part of the expenses incurred by Castle Group in managing us.
I think we need to talk about that.
We do need to talk about it.
Absolutely need to talk about that.
What does anybody wanna say about it? I have to say, first off, I've wondered for a while why we haven't been paying it.
Well, my question is, even back when it was at the beginning and it was the contractor and so forth that was doing it, or the builder, it's only been in the past few years that anybody from Castle even came here. And what we're doing is we're saying, and we'll talk about it more when we get to the agreement, but basically, what we're saying is that the Castle Group is part of Gateway doing work for us, and I think they will construe it that way. And I'm not sure I understand, it's in one pocket and out the other. And at the end of the day, if what we're looking for is to ultimately give all of the authority of paying everything and doing everything back to the HOA, then would be doing this on a temporary basis and, causing, yes, the HOA budget would go down, our budget would go up. And then presumably, at some time not too long after that, the HOA budget is gonna blow up while this one will go down, which is what should happen if the agreement is canceled.
Yeah. Assuming that we are going to switch from, you know, that we will make at some point a switch of these expenses, change the O and M agreement, so that the whole thing gets taken over by the association, by the master association. Yeah, this would all just disappear,
away.
this would go
Just
away.
go away.
So it would be temporary.
So this would be just a temporary thing, kind of
Yeah.
a show the people that
We're doing something?
we're doing something. And I think when they see the huge increase anyway that would come down the road, I think we ought to think about just leaving it status quo for the time being.
When you say the huge increase that will come down the road, what do you mean?
Everything that's in our budget here under, HOA budget,
Yeah.
is what would go back to the HOA for budgeting and so forth. And we just have left the waterway, which can't go, and reserves, which probably won't go, because they're reserves against the assets the district owns. So, all of the rest of the things, you know, our 2 million or 2.6 million or whatever, pretty much just goes back
To the
into the
next-
master budget, which is going to be something that would have to be explained when that happened. I mean, it was awful when we had to explain it the other way. You know, because the P-PAC, or the GSCDD budget came first, and it was a whopping increase. But we went through some big explanations about why when the HOA budget comes out, there were only a couple of lines of, there was auditing and cable and the management company, and that was it. So we're gonna have to, when this happens, we'll be going back to the reverse. And I think this is a temporary situation that we're in now, and it's in one pocket and out of the other.
It definitely is, and if it is temporary, then you're right, there's not much point in making the change.
Mhm.
How far in the future do we kind of envision these changes happening?
Well, I was gonna talk about it
Yeah,
later,
you were
but-
suggesting, yeah, we can kind of live into that. You were suggesting that it should happen at budget time.
which is pretty
Now.
much the way, well, but it can't.
They can't, exactly.
Pretty much the way the contract is written. And we were on the side of it, doing it on behalf of the CDD, that made it pretty tight on the CDD end, and, you know, but on the HOA side, it has to be the HOA that does the pronouncement, that they want to cancel the contract, and it has to be done by April 1st to be effective October 1st, which, essentially, unless the HOA can work out something with the CBD. But how long this contract took John and everybody to work out the first time, probably wouldn't be a bad idea to start it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, yeah.
The discussions, do the notification and start it, but it wouldn't be effective until October 1st of 2020, or that budget.
Mhm.
And you think we should move everything back at that point in time?
I think if the concern is to get everything back in the hands of the HOA, everything we took away when the bankruptcy happened, which is what brought it all about,
Right.
was, what's now in the
HOA. agreement.
HOA part of the budget that we look at. And originally, all of that was with
Was with the
was with the HOA.
HOA previously.
This is the O and M agreement,
Yes,
right?
and so, I was at the meeting when that happened, and I worked with the manager at that point, and we just threw together at the, kind of a slap-happy budget that got us going, to just, get it started, because we were about this point in the budget cycle. when-
Well, and you're right, it's one pocket or the other, we're all paying the same amount, no
Right.
matter where we pay it at.
Mhm.
And so consolidating probably in the long run makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Instead of three different, I mean, right now we've got multiple budgets.
okay, but the discussion today, I think, has to come down to what do we wanna do with this
It was
temporary
temporary.
thing, and I don't know that, I know, Bob, you have concerns about this.
Yeah, I got cut off, I'm first for a long time, I hope I'm not, I truly do everything. The only other comment that I would like to make relative to this is, since it's revenue neutral, I personally don't think we ought to change any of it right now. And yes, sure, it's absolutely true that it's only temporary, but remember, PPAC had nothing to do with the selection of taxing. So therefore, it was an HOA decision, and it's not gonna cost our residents a nickel one way or the other, so it ought to be an HOA expense. I totally agree that we're getting a free ride, and it needs to be addressed in the future, but since this transition to residents running the HOA, I would like to have at least a year under our belt to see, whatever else might surface and changes. I just could keep everything the same for this year, and then next year, when we're not rushed by a budget deadline, we're fully vested.
Nancy, what, obviously, it's your work on the PPCA budget, and Philip, I guess, is pushing this.
Right,
But I guess we would have to accept it,
right.
and if we don't accept it, they're gonna have to absorb it at this point.
I mean,
But they're not absorbing anything they've already currently added.
Yes,
They're not absorbing any of them.
Right.
It's the big-
I agree, yep. So, what, other comments on this, Ron or Joe?
Yeah, this is Ron. I agree with Bob that we should hold off on moving any money around and leave it just the way it is. And agree with Nancy, we need to look at this whole issue about what needs to be moved back to the master versus what stays with the CDD. And just to throw another wrinkle in there, we just include, what do we do with the, I call it reserve dollars. A lot of people call it unallocated dollars. And that all has to be worked out before we move a lot of budget items back to the Master Association and leaving the CDD potentially a lot of our money just sitting there with no purpose behind it. So I think we need to have a group of folks between us and the Master to look at all of these issues between now and, Nancy was saying that it's April 1st deadline, and that would be great. So that gives people 6 to 8 months to work all these little issues out, come up with a plan for transitioning items to the master, and coming up with the explanation of the impact on these various budgets to the community, so they understand what's going on. They should see essentially a net neutral result of all of it.
Yeah.
So it should be okay to explain
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And I'm in that, this is Joe Schofield, I'm in that camp too, and we were told that they weren't gonna be making quick changes, and this seems like a really quick change, and just a shift from the right hand to the left hand. I feel we should be more conservative in this matter. I would have one other comment on it, and that is that, the HOA has said they're not gonna change, interim, or not gonna change Castle, and not gonna change the Terry Lilly or whatever that contact is.
Icon.
But, Icon, okay, but my nickel's worth right now is that a year from now, we may want to at least investigate other management companies. I have nothing against Castle, they've done a great job, but we're talking about a the budget process that we go through, our vetting process, that PPAC has traditionally gone through. So if we are going to be spending money now to pay Castle, then maybe we would have an equal's worth of interest in investigating other firms. Maybe not, because I completely agree with Nancy also, that everything that PPAC does will eventually go to the HOA. That's my gut feeling, is anything.
Yeah,
But since we didn't hire Castle, they did, that would keep it for a while.
mhm. And I must admit, hearing these arguments, I agree with what seems to be the consensus of the committee, that we don't wanna take that on right now.
Okay, but in my feeling is, being that it's a temporary situation, I agree with that. If it wasn't temporary, then I would say we probably should be paying our fair share of the bill, because we do avail ourselves of a lot of Castle Group services. I mean, they're the ones who
So why
do.
did it take long to bring it up, Nancy?
What?
For 8 or 9 years.
Well, Philip Rosner, who's working on the budget, he's the one who brought up the fact that, he asked Castle Group to allocate their resources and tell us how much time they spent on PPAC activities versus Master Association activities.
I think, Bob,
Well, then I would I would like to see that.
the truth of the matter is, Bob, the reason it's gone on for 8 or 9 years is because nobody's asked the question before.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Well, and
that's the reality.
quite honestly, yeah, Lennar was paying, so who was us to argue with that?
Exactly.
Well, we were paying,
Huh?
we
But
were,
I would like
we were
to see,
paying.
Yeah.
I would like to see what activities that Castle is doing that,
Well-
for people. I would
well-
really like to see that.
Well, it seems to me that if the consensus of the committee is that we're not gonna take the $71,000, we don't have to worry about that immediately.
No, I agree with that. I totally agree with all. I'm just saying, in general,
Yeah,
I would like to know what Castle's doing for us for whatever the 71,000, well,
mm-hmm. Well, it seems to me this will all pass into the effort to, and I think it's gotta be the Master Association.
Yeah.
If the Master Association wants to cancel the agreement, which maybe they probably do, but I will tell you that the Master Association Board hasn't gotten to that point. This is not something that we've even broached. So,
I totally agree with that. I'm not suggesting that either. All I'm saying
Yeah.
is that from that point of view, if we are paying, we should have had a vote, that's all.
yeah. And so it seems to me the sense of the committee is that we don't wanna do that at this point.
Okay.
So,
And I don't see anybody with the opinion that I'm not happy with what Castle's doing. I'm thrilled.
yeah,
Particularly when it's getting covered.
yep. But I think your point is well made.
Okay,
So we will, let's continue going through the budget
Okay.
under the assumption that we are not gonna absorb that money. So Nancy, you wanna?
okay. So, for the budget numbers, I input all the expenses through June, so that changed things just a little bit here and there.
Let me ask you something.
Okay.
Do the people out there,
They probably don't have this.
they probably don't have
They probably don't, because I
Okay.
just sent
Okay.
it last night.
What is it?
Was that the one you sent out this morning?
They don't, unless you send it to them.
that? Huh?
Can you send it to them?
Mike just did. Did it go out this morning, Mike?
Mike, did it
I,
go?
I received a change.
You're talking about your
this morning.
email,
It was
right?
2 pages, but I can't read them on my iPhone.
Yeah,
Oh.
some people are saying they got it.
Um,
Is it fiscal year budget 2020 updated 5/31?
Yeah, I got a copy.
you did?
Okay.
Okay, Bob, did you
Yeah.
get it?
I'm looking for it right now, trying to,
Okay.
The one I have from you,
Joe, I'm
Nancy, is-
afraid you're just gonna have to deal with it in the
Well,
dark.
There's
Yeah,
very,
I have a copy. I got the copy, I just can't read it on the iPhone.
okay. There's very few changes on it, other than the, management fees. I updated each category based on, the latest month's expenses, so, a few dollars here and there changes, but basically, other than that 71,000, there's very little that changed from what we gave them last month.
Mhm.
So the numbers on that summary, let's see, if I can figure out exactly how much they'll change if we take out that 71,000. So our entire budget would go up by about 50,000 for the year for our expenses.
Mhm. And the other big increase would, and we have to look at the total budget, and you're just looking at the O and M
Yeah,
part.
right,
The other big increase is the administrative, the overhead.
and we have no control over that.
That, right.
Um,
And that number, if people will go to page 13 of the operating budget, in other words, you were on page 1.
One,
If you go to page 13,
Okay, if someone's in the country south, is that in part two, part three, part four, or part one?
it's the one that's gonna have gateway services at the top, fiscal
Well,
year.
I don't know what, I got all, what we told us. I gotta open one at a time, so if I know that it's sent to me as part of package one, package two, then I know where I'm looking, otherwise.
well,
I-
Bob, you found the page we were discussing, the page 1. The first page, it's part of that package.
And I sent that package out probably 2 or 3 days ago.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well,
Sunday.
you got that package, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to get it back, and I
Okay.
lost it when I went to
Hey.
up to
Hey, Phil?
Yeah.
This is Ron.
Yeah, Ron.
A quick question, I just forgot what we decided to do concerning the reserves for the bridges. What did we approve? Are we gonna put that out of, our
Yes, that,
unaccounted for money?
yes,
Okay,
I think,
I just wanted to confirm my memory on that.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you go to
Page 13 again.
page 13, Bob, have you found it yet?
I went from page 11, next screen was page 13, page 23. What is the title on that?
The title is, it says fiscal year 2020 operating budget dash Pelican Preserve Fund summary.
Oh, I got it.
You got it? Okay.
I actually said 23.
Yeah, I just wanted, I wanted to just point out that the operational, the administrative services and the operational administrative services, these are the expenditures in the 2019 budget. They totaled about $95,000, $29,676 and $65,860.
Yep.
This year, they're gonna total almost 125,000. So that is an almost 40%, or it's an over 30% increase. So that's one of the big things that's driving the number up.
Yeah.
If you look at, again, I hate to keep doing this to you, but if you go back to what we had on page one that we were looking at, you'll see that the costs are up 3.3%. And that's one of the big, that's at least 1% of that 3.3%. It's a big driver.
Right, and if you look back at page 13, you'll see the other fees and charges line under expenditures. That total for this year of 1.666, that's our HOA agreement plus the reserve of 330,000. So that will go up a little bit, just for, when I put in the June numbers, it increased a couple categories a little bit, but it won't go up by as much as this budget says, because we're taking out 71,000.
Right.
I'm trying to do the math here as we're talking, but it's kinda hard.
Okay, so if we go back to what you just said,
Yeah.
the $85,000.
Right.
Effort that the CDC is doing for this not reallocation, what do
Yes,
they call it?
reassessment, yeah, but they only got part way there, Bob.
Mhm.
And the part way they got to was reallocating in effect, the overhead costs now are not allocated 70, 20, 10 as they were before between the enterprise fund, the 001 account and the 002 account, where we were only getting 10%. Now they are allocating 59% to the enterprise fund and 14% to us and 27% to the 001. And that's the big driver of this thing.
Well, I know I've got a number of sides to understanding this, but when I'm looking at the page that shows the $85,000 increase, it just tells me how come the rest of Gateway is next to nothing, and we're 85.
What-
Which page are you on?
What page, how do you know the rest of it?
The very first page
Yeah.
Page one?
says total budget with capital improvement plan.
Total budget with capital improvement plan.
Capital improvement plan.
Yeah, if you look at the general fund,
The general fund goes up, we're paying for that. We pay for that too.
well,
And Pelican Reserve goes up to 5,000.
Not the 001.
huh?
We don't pay for
Yep.
001.
We don't pay for 001.
We don't pay a cent for that? Okay.
Well,
Well,
to the degree that 001's, some of 001's expenses go up, I guess we do pick up. We pick up,
correct.
we pick up 14% of it.
But this revenue neutral, reevaluation of expenditures and that increase, the only community that's negatively impacted is Pelican. There's something wrong.
When you say run that by us again?
Okay, if you look at 02, that's Pelican.
Right,
The variance is 85,000.
right.
Look at 04, 75. The variance is 2,009.
Mm-hmm.
You look at down lakes, nothing. No.
They're all part of 001.
Yeah.
They are in that 5%.
Yeah.
But we are also.
Yeah, we're gonna have, Michael Kraft's gonna come up here and explain to us, what's happening there.
The people and the residents in 004 and Town Lakes, they also pay 100% of the 001 fund and their 004 or 005. Pelican,
Okay.
Pelican pays 0% of the 001. That allocation that Phil's talking about of 120 some thousand, that is included in your 002. So you don't pay into the 001 to the extent that little portion that you're allocated from the total administrative just is a part of your 002. So you guys don't pay any of the 001.
Okay.
Well, what, I'm hearing little percent, but I'm seeing $85,000.
Well,
That's also part of your guys' budget.
right. Part of that increase, is the administrative overhead, but part of it is actual increases in our own expenses.
Right, that's our total increase.
Okay,
Okay?
Right.
That's our total increase.
okay.
All right.
Fine, thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. And so if you look at, page 13 again, you'll see at the bottom where it says includes the following requested reserves. These are the reserves that Stephen Bloom will transfer out of our unallocated and label them with a restriction. So they're putting 100,000 storm damage, 35,000 to start the bridge and boardwalk, fund, and, it's labeling the pond fund so that there's money sitting there for ponds. And Bob, you'll have to tell me if that's the correct amount there for that.
Okay, I'll have to look at it right now.
Okay.
So Nancy, let me understand then, the 35,000 for bridges and boardwalks. We had talked about putting bridges and boardwalks in the capital reserve, in the overall capital reserve fund.
Right. But I thought that the final decision, we were gonna start a separate fund for them. And originally in that very first budget we presented to Stephen, that 35,000 was gonna be an expense for this current year.
Yeah.
And instead, at the last meeting, we said we would take it out of the unallocated funds.
Okay. I would propose, let me now refer everybody to, page 2 of that same package that we were looking at, page 1 and page 13, which is the assessment chart, fiscal year 2020. Through some kind of magic, which I cannot explain to you, only Stephen Bloom knows why.
And maybe Michael.
And maybe Michael does, but our 3.3% total increase, which shows on page 1 for 002, when you translate that down to a per EAU increase, you will notice that all of those per EAU increases under Pelican Preserve on page 2 are less than 1.5%. So somehow, the three.
You guys have added EAUs.
Huh?
You've added EAUs.
Because we've added EAUs, apparently. And so the increase that we thought in total is 3.3%, when it gets down to the individual resident, it's only, depending upon where you are, it's somewhere between 1.001, well, for the golf course, 1.09 and 1.41, depending upon where you are. Now that increase includes, you know, the debt services in there, and so that, and the debt service didn't go up at all, so that's part of the reason the percentage is not increasing very much. My suggestion would be that rather that we go back, originally, remember, Ron, you had made the suggestion, or we had asked you, and you had come up with a number of $35,000 to add to the general capital reserve fund to include the boardwalk and the bridges. And then we took that out because I had asked for an additional $30,000 for the safety and security work group projects. My suggestion would be that we move that $35,000 back into, in other words, we take it out of the budget for next year and put it in, you know, in other words, increase the reserve from 330 to 365,000.
Instead of having a separate.
Instead of having a separate,
boardwalk.
instead of having a separate reserve for the boardwalks.
Okay.
And so that would result in some increase, but would still probably leave us under 2% on a per EAU basis.
So you wanna increase our budget by that instead of taking out of the unallocated?
That's what I'm suggesting. Because I think we should be, funding those bridges and the boardwalk out of the current year budget if we can afford to do so, and I think we can.
Okay, here's where my memory gets in trouble again. But it seemed to me that we've had 25,000, it might be 35, some quantity of money in the budget for the last 9 years, but it wasn't for replacement, it was for the bi-yearly boardwalk fee.
Yes, but that's different.
Is it different? Okay.
That's different. I mean,
I'll be quiet.
that's maintenance, Bob. We're talking about,
Oh, yeah. Okay, then I said I thought I was faulty when I began, so I'll leave it alone.
yeah. We have chosen, recall that we have chosen that the work that's being done on the bridges this year, we are gonna take out of our unallocated
Absolutely.
reserves.
Absolutely.
You know, that $210,000 that we have recommended to the board, or the increase from 160 to 210.
And our current year, our 2020 budget, right now we have 12,000 in for boardwalk maintenance and repairs.
Right.
Okay, good.
And,
So every 2 years, you gotta,
well,
Yeah.
and that's an increase. Last year, we only had 9,000 in that budget, and Scott recommended an increase in that this year. But I thought the reason we were gonna take the 35,000 out of our unallocated was in an attempt to start to draw down those unallocated and assign them to things.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be thinking about that, because if we've got allocated reserves, we may not wanna do that right now, because I'm not sure allocated reserves are gonna follow, if the agreement is canceled, will follow back to the HOA. If we have unallocated, if they're assigned to specific bridges or whatever, then I think that that's a specific asset, and it may have to stay with the district. But I think that's something that maybe the HOA attorney ought to take a look at, along with somebody from the district. I would just worry, if we think we need to use some of that money for things, that we might not wanna be quite so quick.
To start
Start.
assigning those unallocated funds.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and
That
I,
sounds like a good idea.
yeah, and I go a step further, a second reason is, it seems to me that from an expense point of view, we really should be funding the, bridges and boardwalk out of, that those funds should be in the overall capital reserve, and we should be reflecting them in the,
Yes.
as an expense in our budget
I agree.
for 2020.
Okay, so we'll
And
move
so
that back up here.
so that if we so if we move the 35,000 back and put it in, and have the reserve go up to 365, or the allocation to the reserve go to 365, as Ron, as you had originally recommended, I think we ought to do it that way, because we can still do it and still bring in the increase in our budget to a reasonable number, probably in the 2% range for most people.
Well, that's adding 35,000 to it.
You know. I don't know, where would that leave us?
It would probably, I would think we're
3%.
getting up close to 3%.
3%.
Yeah,
That would put us up to 3%,
because
close to 3%.
85,000 put us at basically 1.5.
Yeah,
So increasing that by 35,000 is probably gonna take us up to
up
about
to
3.
3%.
Yeah, yeah, I would think so.
Okay, well, what are people's feelings about what I propose?
I'll accept it.
This is Ron, I'm good with it.
You agree? So
Yeah.
what we are gonna, I'm sorry, Joe, go ahead.
I said, I agree too.
Okay. And it seems to me, hopefully, that we will do as we've done in the past couple of years, is to send out a letter to folks, when, before they get their non-ad valorem taxes and see the final numbers, to explain to them why we have a 3% increase, and there are, part of it is the overhead allocation has gone up, and there are other items that we can point to that I think are, have increased.
Well, we can talk about, we're replacing the bridges this year and we're allocating 35,000 towards the replacement of the boardwalk in upcoming years.
Right.
Because it's bad, that boardwalk is bad.
Yeah.
Needs to be done.
Yeah.
But then that raises the question, a year down the road, if we need to replace the boardwalk, are we gonna take that out of unallocated, or is it all gonna come out of those reserves? Because that's gonna be a pretty expensive project, won't it, Scott?
Yes, that'll be a $300,000 or $400,000 project.
Which
It
would-
will exceed 400.
You exceed $400,000. My feeling is the first time around, we may wanna take it out of unallocated, but that we ought to be providing for doing it down the road. In
Yeah.
other
Can I
words,
ask a question though? Nancy, how much, on average, are we spending a month on, budget-wise? What's our total?
Oh, you mean as compared to the actual, compared to,
Well, what, are we spending $500,000 a month? Are we spending
No, our-
$100,000? Are we,
around 100,000, our budget is about 1.2 million for
Okay.
the year, so about 100,000 a year, a month.
A month.
And it varies throughout the year because, like right now, tree trimming is just starting, which is a big expense, so these expenses this month will be higher.
But I think we need to kind of keep in mind an average number, and at the time, and again, this is assuming the HOA is gonna wanna cancel the agreement.
Right.
There are going to need to be enough funds to go past October first to November.
Right.
When the HOA budget kicks in, because, our budget here is annual, and the
Right.
HOA goes quarterly.
Mhm.
So, so there's gonna be a shortfall period. So I'm just saying, we need to think that there's got to be, that unallocated's gonna have to carry.
Right.
And I, at this point, I think there's plenty in the unallocated.
I do too, but I
Yeah, there's
just
a couple
wanna.
$1 million.
Sorry, go ahead, whoever out there in telephone land.
I'm here, Joe.
I thought somebody was trying to make a comment. No, okay,
Our unassigned right now is, just over 3 million.
But that includes
That includes the ponds,
the ponds, so.
which we will take out and allocate that specifically to ponds. And they haven't moved over our 330,000, he always does that at the end of the year,
yeah, right.
the reserve amount, so that's gotta move over yet, and that will probably.
The 330 from fiscal year 2019.
Right, he always takes it at the very end of the year,
Right.
so that's gonna leave us still about 2 million,
Mhm.
Okay,
so that should cover any shortfalls for those.
and give us some money to do projects,
Yes,
okay.
yeah,
Okay,
I would think
But
so.
I think we need to keep in the back of our minds that we can't spend it all down.
right,
And our capital project one right now is at, 1.8 million. So if we had to take 400,000 out of it for the boardwalk next year, we'd still have a good amount sitting there.
mhm,
It's not like it's gonna wipe out our capital reserves.
right. And that 1.8 doesn't include,
This
if you put
year's.
in another 335,
Right.
365.
This year. And probably this year would only be 330 because I don't think we,
No, right,
it'll only be 330 this year, next year would be
365.
365. So yeah, we'd be a little over 2 million in the capital reserves and, once you take out the ponds and everything, about 2 million in the unallocated.
Okay.
So financially, we're in good shape,
Is you-
no doubt about it.
Is everybody with us?
Yeah, I'm with you.
Any further questions?
Yeah.
Um,
Paul.
okay, so I think it is the sense, hmm? Yep,
I'll make one 5-cent comment.
yeah,
So that whenever we transition from the district to the HOA, right now, every resident benefits from, as a tax deduction, the $1,100 we pay into the non-ad valorem. We
right,
lose that, but it's HOA. It's not much, but it's something.
Most of it,
yeah. I think, Bob, in a lot of cases, people don't even take that deduction.
I don't think it's a,
And actually, I think if you looked, although,
yes. Plug your ears, Bob.
yeah, many, you really can't take non-ad valorem as a deduction. If you did it, you know, I think most people probably take their entire property taxes.
right,
But the reality
That's
is,
what I thought.
yeah,
That's what I thought.
yeah, but the reality is, you should really take only the ad valorem part of your property taxes is really the only part that's deductible. The non-ad valorem,
Okay, well,
the non-ad valorem.
Well, thank you for that, I will go back and amend my last bit.
Yeah,
We know you will.
I think,
I think we need to drop that part of the discussion.
can we leave that out of the minutes?
yeah, yeah.
This could come up in my trial when I'm going, I didn't know.
You know, only going forward.
Yeah, right,
You better make sure the minutes don't reflect your comments.
right. Okay, in any event, so I think where that leaves us is that our, Nancy, if I'm reading this correctly, what we will add $35,000,
We're
To
gonna,
the-
yeah,
Right.
we'll add 35,000, there were some minor amounts that went up just based on current expenses. I will get a revised one out and send it out to you guys tonight,
okay,
because I'm going out of town tomorrow.
all right, okay,
Well, the important thing is that Stephen gets
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
is final.
Yeah,
yeah,
I'll send it out to you guys first, and
Yeah.
then I'll send it to Stephen,
okay.
okay?
So,
Is everybody comfortable with that?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, we
All
will
right.
move forward. And I guess, Scott, you were on here twice, really, the
Yeah.
FPL LED.
Talk about that.
Timing of the revised agreement, I think we've kind of beaten that one.
I think what I
Today.
would like to ask
Yeah,
is that, it was very enlightening sitting down and reading this again after over 2 years of not reading it.
this is the O and M agreement.
This is the O and M agreement. I would encourage all of the committee members to read it, and I think the HOA needs to read it. The HOA is the party that's going to have to take action to terminate the agreement. And I think you're probably gonna want to, because that will give you more control over everything. But the way we did it the last time is probably the best way to work it, is that negotiations start, and they start before
Well before